Hey everybody, Shane here, Shoebox Legends. Thanks for tuning in for another episode today. This one is going to be a little bit different than my standard fare. We are going to look at some cards. In fact, I have what the kids would call a banger to reveal during the course of today's video. But my intent really is to talk through a topic that I think has been on a lot of people's minds, and it's certainly been on my mind quite a bit in the past few months or even year. And it's caused me at times kind of some angst and anxiety about my participation in this hobby, but I think I've kind of come out on the other side of it now. I want to share my thoughts and talk it through because I think it's something that a lot of you may be able to relate to, or at the very least, I'd be curious to hear your opinions or your thoughts on this in the comments if you're willing to share. So I'm going to call this episode The Bull Market Paradox, and we'll get to what I mean by that momentarily. But before we do, I need to lay just a little bit of groundwork to kind of help set the stage as to where my mind has been at on this topic. So I've been in the hobby as an adult now for over 18 years, full-time, haven't taken one break in all that time, just collecting and consuming content and buying cards. Absolutely love it. But if I kind of step back and take a look at my timeline in the hobby from like a bird's eye view, I can really split it into two different eras. Certainly for the purpose of this video or this mental exercise. So the first era comprised really the first maybe 12 or 13 years that I was back in the hobby, say from 2007 through maybe 2019. And just for the sake of brevity, we'll call that like my golden era in today's video. And then the second stage of my time in the hobby here as an adult has really been from 2020 through present day. And while there are a lot of similarities in how I've approached this hobby throughout, there are definitely some stark differences between the two eras that I think have caused me some of this kind of anxiety about the hobby. And that's what I want to talk through today for two reasons. Number one, like I said, I'm really curious if any of you can relate to this or maybe have your own opinions to share with me. And second to that, I find that sometimes by talking these things through out loud, it kind of helps me work through them and sort of crystallize my own opinions and viewpoints. And I think I may have finally arrived at that. We'll see how long and rambling this video turns out. But let's start with what I called my golden era, the first 12 years I was back in the hobby. Like I said, collected cards continuously through that period. And what I loved about it was, while cards have always been a quote unquote, store of value, you hear that term a lot and I agree with it. They weren't going up and down in value like to some crazy amount like they had been, during the last, say, 5 or 6 years. So what was nice about that, I could kind of live with my head in the sand, just collect what I liked. I had my running list of cards that I wanted to pick up. I would get to them when I can or when I could, was surviving on a very small hobby budget. And then maybe once a year, I would treat myself to, a bigger card by my standards, maybe a card that was $400, $500, when I got like a tax return or a work bonus. And I didn't really feel any sense of pressure to keep track of card prices or the market or anything like that. Because even with those bigger cards, and you see two examples of those in the background here, my 53 Topps Jackie and my 1979 Topps Wayne Gretzky rookie card, even with those cards, there was no rush or no sense of urgency to pick those up. I knew, let's say it was back in 2008 or 2009, and I had these two cards on my list, and I only had the budget to buy one. I would just pick up the one card, and the only time I cared about prices at all during my golden era was when I got to a particular card on my list and it was time to purchase it. At which point I would kind of look at what they had been selling for recently to make sure that I wasn't overpaying by some gross amount. And then I would just go out and find the best copy that I could for the budget that I had available. And that would be that. And I knew that the card that I passed on, I would just get to that in the future. So like, I think I bought my Jackie Robinson first. Maybe it was 2008, let's just say for argument's sake, in the winter of 2008. And even though I passed on my Wayne Gretzky at the time, or preferred getting the Jackie first, I knew that I could come around a year later and get my Wayne Gretzky. Maybe it would be $20 more or $40 more than it was the year prior. But that's just how I operated. I didn't care about prices. I didn't care about the value of my collection. And I only paid attention to the prices of the cards that I was immediately trying to acquire. And then once a card was in my collection, I never thought about its price or value again. And I can honestly say that. It just wasn't a factor. Let's fast forward now to the second era, which, not coincidentally, really occurred with the COVID boom back in 2020. And I know a lot of folks watching this may have only entered the hobby during that boom or afterwards, but it's a very different hobby now. And I think what's been causing me some angst is, I feel a need or a pull to some degree to pay attention to my card values and follow the market. And I really don't love that. I would much prefer in many ways to go back to the way that I collected during the quote unquote golden era. But I'm not sure, and I do try to do that in some circumstances. So here's another card. I've been blabbing on long enough here. This card I picked up within the last year, the 53 Bowman Color Mickey Mantle. And in many ways, when I'm out to acquire a card like this one, I do operate like I did back then. I look up, recent prices, and I make sure that I pay somewhere in the realm of that. But honestly, I'll pay even more than that. Really, my goal is just to get the best example that I can find at the time with the money that I have available, just like, same way I approached it during the golden era. So in one sense, that's a similarity. I'm still trying to collect the same way, but more and more, I feel like that's maybe just not advisable or possible, or like I'm swimming against the current. And the reason is, prices have just gone so crazy up and down in these past few years with respect to both vintage, modern, everything that I collect, all sports. It doesn't all happen at the same time. There's been ups and downs, but I think everybody can agree the hobby landscape and the quote unquote price market of cards is, much more unpredictable and volatile than it was, over the last 5 years than it was for, say, the 20 years prior to that. And I feel this pull where it's sort of forced me to keep an eye on the market. And, here's another example of that. This is a card that I picked up recently. This is the big card that I haven't shown off that I referred to at the outset of the episode. But in addition to the modern cards that you see back there, I love or the vintage cards, pardon me, that you see in the background. I love collecting modern as well. And I picked up this card over the past summer. And this is for those who don't collect modern, I feel this is a monster card. And it's another example of me trying to collect the way that I did in my golden era. I had determined that this was one of the modern baseball cards that I wanted to add to my collection more than any other, price aside. So I went out and to be honest with you, I set a new comp on this card. I paid more for this than probably anybody's paid for a similar example. And this was just a couple of months ago. I don't care about that. I don't feel guilty about that. I stand by my decision. I love the card, and it's not about, obtaining the best price at all costs or, whittling down sellers. I just want the card. However, I do have to pay attention to pricing, or I feel the need to. And the reason is, cards that I'm pursuing now, 18 years in, tend to be some pricier, bigger cards like the ones that you see up in the background. I still love my dollar box cards. I still love my cheese box rummages and, poking around on ComC to find some fun stuff that's $1 or $2. But when I really sit and think and put a lot of effort into how do I want my collection to look, how do I want to improve it, a lot of the cards that I'm looking to add at this point are significant. And so they cost a decent amount of money. And I run a relatively strict hobby budget here. As much as I love baseball cards, there are many other things in life that come first for me. Financial stability, not having debt, taking care of my family, preparing for retirement, living below my means, all those things come before sports cards, as I think they should for everybody, at least that's my opinion. But it's hard for me to come up with the funds to go after cards like this Mantle and like this Ohtani, especially in today's market. When I bought my Jackie Robinson rookie back in 2008, and this is not the copy that I bought, I've downgraded it since, but I think I paid about $400 for it in a PSA 6. Nowadays, these two cards that I bought within the past year are comma cards. And in the case of the Mantle, well beyond just a comma card, even over $2,000. That is an amount of money that is outside my normal collecting budget. So the way that I can fund those purchases is by selling cards that I already own, some of the many, many cards that I've picked up over the prior 18 years that don't have that kind of monetary value, and then condensing all those profits down and, kind of trading up and escalating up into some of these bigger cards. So because of that, I have to kind of keep an eye on value. And the other side of this coin is that because prices are so crazy now, I almost feel compelled to keep track of the value of some of the cards that I already own. And that's something that I never cared to do before. It's not an exercise that I particularly enjoy, but I feel as though I'm almost being irresponsible if I don't do that. And the example that I'm going to share, there's many examples of this that I could give, but it's these hockey buybacks of all things. So I'm not going to go into detail. I want to keep this video from getting longer than it's already going to be. Suffice it to say, you guys know, if you've been by the channel, I love collecting buyback cards. They've sort of been one of the ways that I've left my stamp, pun intended, on the hobby in recent years. And I know my channel is somewhat known for those, which is fine. So these hockey buybacks I picked up during my golden era, as I referred to it. Paid very little for these. These are common players. Was picking them up for $1 or $2 a piece just because I love buybacks and I love the concept, and they were fun cards. But these, if I'm being honest, once I've collected them, they sit in a box in the dark in the corner of my card closet, which is fine. That's okay. However, I came to the realization this past spring when I was searching for some, because I've always had a saved search for those, that I was seeing them start to disappear as soon as they were listed on eBay, and even at prices that to me seemed like exorbitant. And so long story short, I listed a couple as kind of a test drive on eBay. Sure enough, they got snatched up immediately. And so I ended up reaching out to the person who bought them. We've developed a relationship. He is a passionate hockey buyback collector with a bankroll that certainly exceeds mine, hobby-wise. And throughout the course of this year, I have been selling these buybacks direct to him, on the, maybe for exorbitantly more than I paid. Let's say could be 30 times what I paid for these, or 40 times what I paid for these just years ago for common players. And I'm letting them go now, even though I love them, because it feels almost irresponsible to me to have something that just sits kind of neglected or somewhat neglected. Because if you have tens of thousands of cards like I had at my apex, there's no way you're looking at them all and enjoying them all on a daily or even weekly or even monthly basis. And it started to feel irresponsible of me, knowing the value that they had to another collector, to have that much value sitting in a cardboard box in a closet with cobwebs around it in the corner of my card room. I just couldn't really sleep well with that scenario. And so I'm moving on from those, and they are generating the very funds that I need to go after some of these bigger cards. I would not own this Shohei Ohtani, and I would not own this Mickey Mantle if I hadn't developed this relationship with this buyback collector and purchased so many of these back in the day that are now, more desirable to him at a higher price point. So again, one example I could give of many of why I feel sort of compelled nowadays to at least keep half an eye on the value, not only of the cards that I'm seeking out, but of the cards that I already own. And it's not just about the hobby. I've made enough money in the sales and transactions of these buyback cards, even within the last 12 months, that not only have I strengthened my card collection, but I've been able to contribute money towards a big goal that I have in life, which is early retirement from my stressful career. So keeping an eye on these values has an impact on my ability to achieve significant life goals, provide for my family, and it goes well beyond just strengthening my baseball card collection. So this is where the paradox comes in, the bull market paradox. I don't want to have to keep track of the prices and values of my cards. I very much understand the viewpoint of the folks who swear against this. They say that it's not true collecting. They want to, and I feel this as well, they want their hobby to be an escape from terms like bull market and bubble and crash. And I 100% agree with and sympathize with that viewpoint. But on the flip side, the paradox here, I feel like I can't operate that way anymore because of the way the hobby has kind of grown just exponentially in recent years, and because of the opportunity cost that I'm leaving laying in some of these boxes sitting around my office. And so what's the solution to this? I don't know that I have one, and that's why I refer to it as a paradox. I would love to hear any of your comments on this again below, or reach out to me if you're someone who I interact with on a personal level, because it's something that I've really been struggling with. And to the point, I don't enjoy these terms being part of my hobby. I really don't. And it's discouraged me at points to where I almost have gone nuclear in the past year and just sold 90% of my collection and walked away from the hobby and taken a break. But that's not really something I want to do either. I love this hobby. It provides me a ton of nostalgia going back over 30, 35 years now. I've made so many great friends. I love the way it keeps me anchored to and following modern sports and all the great conversations and the level of interest that it provides me for so many hours every week. I don't want to leave this hobby. I love this hobby. And so I think really I'm just stuck with this paradox, and maybe things will change in the future, but I think this is how it is. And what kind of got me through my discouragement here was looking at this from a broader perspective. And even though I'm frustrated because I feel like the hobby was, more fun for me maybe in the first 15 years than it has been in the last 5, I look at it and I think, maybe my dad or others who grew up in the 50s feel the same way. Maybe to them, they thought this in the early 90s. Like, what a shame this is. We used to just flip these cards against the wall for fun or put them in our bike spokes. And now they're Beckett magazines where these are viewed as an investment. And so I think this is just something that happens with the passage of time. We can't control it. And so my choice is just to embrace it. I'll continue to live in the hobby. I will pay some attention to my card values because I can't afford not to, or at least that's how I feel at the moment. And in the meantime, I'll just make the best of it. So I'm gonna stop it there. I don't want this to go on for 20 minutes or more. Try to keep my videos short out of respect for everybody's time. But again, I would love to hear your opinion if this is something you could share in the comments below or reach out to me. And I appreciate you sticking with me through my kind of rambling thoughts as I work this out in my head. I'll be back soon, as you all know. And in the meantime, I hope everybody out there is just enjoying this awesome hobby. Take care.